ELI5 Why computers need to be restarted periodically to function correctly. Computer software is imperfect and doesn't always clean up after them nicely. It's like a desk. You start in the morning with a pristine desk, but as the day goes, mess slowly creeps. Pencils are not in the right places anymore, there are pieces of paper laying around, etc., and maybe a half-empty cup of coffee. It starts to get more difficult to work there, and the coffee poses serious risks. Whole desk might crash. A restart brings that desk to a pristine state again. When code has been running for a long time, it can get out of whack. It could be file handles that aren't closed, internal data structures that get slightly corrupted, software that talks to hardware, drivers get out of sync with the hardware. All sorts of possibilities. If this code is running as an application, restarting the application would typically solve it. If the software is the operating system itself, rebooting gives it a clean slate and a known state. Agree with the other comments explaining why many computer systems have to be restarted from time to time. I wanted to point out a very fundamental reason, though it simply isn't a big requirement for many computers to be up for years at a time. If, for example, most Windows and Mac users demanded that their machines have years of uptime, then they would. But you trade that for a lot fewer features, which is really what most users are bewitched by. Features. Imperfect code typically. If they were perfect, programs would always clean up after themselves, and let go of what they have grabbed and only take what they really need. But they're not, so you get things that hang around, or take up too much because they keep asking for more without using what they've got. Restarting just resets everything and starts with a clean slate. Like if you could clean your living room by just getting a new one. Your computer's memory is full of programs. They're starting and stopping all the time as you open and close whatever apps and tools you use. Sometimes one of them stops working correctly and causes a problem. Restarting the computer guarantees that the memory gets a fresh start. It's a lazy debugging step on support's part. It will be better to find a problem and fix it, but it also works a lot of the time and it's quick. Many replies here will tell you the same thing: memory leak and updates. The real reason you are specifically asked to restart and not just shut down and power on again is because you are probably using Windows, and a feature of Windows that's intended to make the computer switch on faster, means it doesn't usually fully shut down. Restarting ensures a proper reboot. Majority of the little quirks and problems the computer has can be fixed by just rebooting it, forcing it to quit all the processes and restart them from scratch. So rather than waste time trying to track down one weird process that got hung up somewhere, they just have you restart it. That way you can weed out 90 of the problems you encounter. Imagine your computer is a classroom full of kids' programs doing activities. Over time, they make a mess: memory leaks, cached files, and might start arguing, software conflicts. Turning off the computer is like sending the kids home and cleaning the room. When you start it again, the room's clean and everyone starts fresh. Simple as that. It is like cleaning off a table. Bits and scraps and crumbs accumulate in the computer and you need to clear everything off and start fresh. In this case it is bits and scraps of programs and documents you were working on, things the computer was saving in case and updates that couldn't install while the programs were running. The reason they tell you to restart it is because computers tend to start working correctly from a fresh boot. But also, computers need to install updates, and typically need to do so while being booted and can't update on the fly. So restarting does that for you. Zombie processes. They're bits of code that should have terminated, but instead they continue living and wandering around inside the PC, eating the brains of other processes. A reboot shuts down all processes, including zombies, and starts only what is supposed to be running. To add to what others have said, sometimes programs' drivers get into a weird state, and it is easier to tell a non-technical user to restart the computer as a whole than it is to walk them through finding and killing the offending process and relaunching it. Computers can work flawlessly for decades. Windows can't. Sometimes software will reach a state where it's not supposed to be. Then one needs to load a known good state and try again. Sometimes hardware does the same, but that's less likely. Rebooting is like moving into a new home. Everything starts off clean. After you live there a while, dust collects under the fridge and all the other places that are forgotten. A reboot is moving out, doing a full clean, and moving back in. Remember those defense missiles the US had? They didn't tell them to reset them every once in a while because the different clocks inside would get out of sync. They told the missile to go get that scud butt. Sometimes programs need to restart background services. Finding those services is tedious and dull. Restarting your PC restarts those services. Saved you 3 pages of comment essays to refresh all the system memory registers. I realize that I do this as a habit from my old work. Well, it's easier to do this every day than to deal with tech issues. Here is a good video about that, from the Windows engineer who wrote Task Manager. Computers are not logical or infallible. They are dark magic and need rabbit and chicken sacrifices. Also reboot 3 times. Inefficient memory management causing apps to hold memory longer than they should. It could feasibly be memory leaks. It's only necessary because you guys don't know how to use computers without creating system instability. Piggyback queue is restarting the computer different from when it shuts itself off and sleeps?